Claire Hargrove was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. From an early age, she was given just about anything she wanted due to her father, Reginald, loving his daughter dearly. To everyone else, the Hargroves seemed to be the perfect family, but the reality was much darker. This love that Reginald had for his daughter made his wife, Sophia, Claire's mother, incredibly resentful of her. As Claire began to blossom into a beautiful young woman, her father's love for her began to grow into an incredibly unhealthy and disturbing obsession. One night, when Reginald came home from one of his poker games, smelling of alcohol and cigars, he broke into Claire's room and forced himself on her. This was the first of many attacks on Claire by her father. But it wasn't only her father who began to abuse her. Her mother began giving her beatings on a regular basis, claiming that she was a product of Satan for seducing her own father. One night, Claire confided in the stably boy, Hugo, about what had been happening to her, and he suggested that she try to run away. After a few weeks of planning, she stole some valuable items and was able to get away with Hugo's help. For 6 months, she was able to remain in hiding, but her father eventually found her. When she was brought home to her mother and father, the first thing they noticed was that she was visibly pregnant. She had learned that it was Hugo who had given her location away, but only after being beaten nearly to death. Upon her return, she was immediately locked in her room in order to avoid a potential scandal. No one was sure as to who was the father, but Sophia suspected it to be Reginald. During her time locked in her room, she was served her meals by Hugo, now deformed and disabled from his savage beating. He apologized profusely for his betrayal, but Claire, being the kind-hearted person that she was, forgave him. He then asked her if she knew who the father was, which she did not answer. He then asked her if she had a name for the baby, to which she responded, Willow. One night, as Hugo was bringing Claire her meal, he was stopped by Sophia, who took the meal and said that she would feed Claire and wanted to speak with her. Hugo, who was indebted to Sophia for nursing him back to health, remained silent and reluctantly handed off the food. The next night, when Hugo was bringing Claire's food, he noticed her bedroom door left open and her room empty. He had looked all over the grounds for her, but he eventually found her, hanging from a tree, her womb cut open, and the fetus lying on the ground under her feet. Hugo cut Claire down and buried her and her unborn baby under the very tree she was hung upon. He carved the name Willow on the tree. Some time had passed, and Hugo would visit that tree every day. He began to notice a knothole begin to form where the carving used to be. It twisted and gnarled until it eventually began to resemble that of a crying baby's face. Not long after, the Hargroves celebrated the birth of a new daughter named Jane. A few years later, Jane was playing in the house when she somehow got into the backyard and went missing. The whole household was in an uproar looking for Jane, but it wasn't until they reached Willow's tree that they found out what happened to Jane. A new knothole had formed next to Willow's face, and the knothole resembled that of a crying child. Hugo smiled as he looked at Willow's face, seeing her finally happy and no longer alone. Sophia approached Willow's tree with an axe, looking completely unhinged. She swung the axe into the trunk, and from the wound spewed a red liquid. The knotholes vibrated as an ear-piercing scream was generated from the tree. Sophia, who was closest in proximity, vomited as blood burst from her ears. She collapsed on the ground, knocked unconscious, but was alive. The axe was pushed out of the trunk, and the meat of the tree pulsated as new bark formed around the wound, healing it. Eventually the Hargrove Manor was abandoned, and Willow's tree developed more knotholes over time. When Hugo was an elderly man, he returned to Willow's tree, seeing the many faces upon it, but he recognized Willow's face, and she seemed visibly happy to see him again. He approached the tree and hugged its trunk, giving himself to be added to Willow's collection. Willow's tree still stands today at the bones of Hargrove Manor. So if you ever see the tree, don't go too close, for you may be added next.